It's 5:02. We have Bill Cummings, Patrick Fortin, Paul Manganero, Enzo
Recording
Ruscianato,
in progress.
that too. Stephanie Zaremba and Sumya. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to fill in the last name right now because it's not on my list.
Yeah, it's Soumya Ganapathy.
Ganapathy. Town engineer Beth Rudolph, Lynn Sweet from LDS Consulting, Marty Jones from the town manager Lisa Wong, and council Mina Makarios. I'm going to get the agenda up, but we basically have 2 hours this evening, 6 topics. We're going to try to do 20 minutes apiece. Some might go over, some might go under, but that's going to be kind of the time frame, at least for some of these. And I'm going to get up. If the host could able participant screen sharing or elevate
all
me.
set.
I
Try it again.
Yep. Okay. So this is the agenda for the evening for each of these 6 dashed items. We're thinking about 20 minutes, but like I said, it might not be 20 and maybe over 20 for some, but that's what we're shooting for. Leaving without a doubt 20 minutes at the end to talk a little bit about some work between now and the next meeting that's extremely important, and a review of the report and a little bit of how public feedback is going to potentially enter that report. So now I'm actually going to turn it over to Lynn Sweet to talk about some of the questions that were asked at the last meeting, basically for her to go talk to Civico and look at new numbers and go from there. So Lynn, why don't you take it away?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm having some connection problems, so hopefully that won't impact the Zoom. Very nice to see everybody again. So as you may recall, the last slide that I had on the screen from the last meeting had a number of questions for our company, from our company to Civico. So I did pose all of those questions to Civico and received some response from them and provided an updated memo. I don't know if it has gone out yet to their responses. They did answer all of my questions. And I think some of the bigger items to point out was, as I mentioned, there were concerns about the parking revenue with the discussion last week, that the feeling, at least from the task force, was that you did not want commuter spaces, that income went down. There was a willingness to change the 80% rent units, the 8 units, to 60% units, which brought in parking revenue. So where they were losing, not that it would bring in tax credit equity. So the net effect of the loss of the income on parking was set off by the additional equity that could come in from the 8 affordable units. And I'm sure that that's going to be a larger discussion amongst the select board and everybody about what to do about parking. But we have solved at least the can it be built part of the conversation, not necessarily the running of it. In addition, Civico, I had noted that there was a line item on the operating income that had Civico paying themselves back for the $600,000 in developer fee that they had set aside at construction closing, that they will get that money back, but that it will terminate in year 12. And the other thing is that is not actually going to have any interest on it. So I think we had to spend a little time on the developer fee. This portion of the developer fee would not be collected at closing, but would be over time to the extent that the project can support it going down the road. But it will end. It will not go on in perpetuity. So I also, I'm going to have you flip to the next slide and have a quick discussion about sort of how cash flow works kind of below the line. This is sort of Finance 101 for those who are not necessarily familiar with it. And I think the most important thing that I want to point out is that there really was nothing unusual in Civico's numbers in looking at an affordable housing project. The unusual aspects that come in were related more to the retail and the parking. Um, Not unsurprising with an mainly affordable project. The developer is not going to make a lot of money off of this project. They are really reliant on their developer fee for the first 2 years in a capital event that would happen somewhere between year 15 and year 20. Um, so what I've given you is just year one, and basically it shows that the net operating income, and that net operating income simply comes from subtracting operating costs from income. And then the next line item that they take out is their debt service on the project, which we talked about is lower debt service because they can't afford anything because the 60% rents are below market. Even, and there is a small number of market rate rents as well. So what remains is the $118,000. So there is an asset management fee that goes to the limited liability company where the investors are kind of housed. So that brings you down to year one cash flow of $103,000. So the next line item, what we're calling 8% return on developer equity, that is that $600,000 that they are loaning from their developer fee. So that gets paid back over 12-year period, once a year to the extent that it's available. And that leaves $55,000 up for grabs, if you will. So the developer, my understanding is under the current LDA, has agreed that they will pay supplemental lease payments every year to the town, and have estimated that year one be around $5,500. So then you're down to about $50,000. So what happens with that money there? What they next have to pay to is they're saying that they're going to try and repay. They're going to ask the town of Winchester for affordable housing trust funds to help them score better on their state housing applications. So they're saying that 25% of that money is going to go to pay back the loan. So presumably the town will get repaid and they can use that money and loan that out for other projects. And then they've got about $1 million in subordinate debt, and they're going to use the remaining 75% to pay for them. So, at the end of the day, the developer is walking away with maybe $20,000 a year in their pocket. And that really is going to, every year the operating costs are going to go up. And the rents are going to go up on the affordable units, but they really just keep pace with the operating costs. It's a very different analysis than market rate rents tend, under non-COVID circumstances, to go higher than what those operating costs are. But there's only a small portion, I think a third of the units in this project that are market rate. So the developer for years 1 through 15 will be getting very little cash flow. And hopefully the town will be getting some supplemental base rent and then paying back the Winchester loan. So essentially what happens in year 15, and I don't have the numbers for that, and I apologize, but I do know that there are provisions in the LDA for the town to get, some sort of cost between year 15 and 20. There will be some sort of a recapitalization of the project. And if there is excess funds, those go to the developer, those go to the investor who's gotten given the tax credits, And some of that money goes to the town as well, based on what the LDA says. And essentially what happens is they put new debt on the property, they make the needed capital repairs that are made, and they start all over again at a year one. So again, cash flow in year 16, let's just say the capital event happens in year 15, that year 16 is going to be the same minor amount of cash flow. So the way that these developments work is, if you carried this on for 99 years, the only real events that are going to happen is every, year 15, they're going to refinance it with capital. Those affordable units aren't going to go away. The permitting documents, whether you do a special permit, a zoning amendment, or 40B, those 40 units are going to be affordable in perpetuity, and they're always going to be subject to the government regulating them. So they're always just going to basically be keeping pace with operating costs. So I'm going to end it there and just say that, I appreciate Civico's willingness to work with me to revise the numbers, to make the changes that I requested of them, to turn the numbers around. And I think, that there is definitely a little, the real estate taxes. I forgot to kind of mention that in the first slide. We did get the real estate taxes up by, I think, another 40,000 by using the right cap rate. So I think, that there's some positives that came out of this. And if nothing else, maybe some clarity. So I thank you for your time.
Thanks, Lynn. So we have some time here for some questions related to the questions that were posed. Paul, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that information. At the last meeting, Enzo, I believe, was asked the question if we could do a comparison to revenue on what the town would be making on this project compared to what Civico would be making. I didn't hear any of those numbers. Do we have any of that data?
So in that year, that year one, basically, I believe that, and I'm having trouble accessing my documents. I do not know why. So I can't give you the exact numbers, only really what I put in my pro forma. But year one, Civico would be getting that $5,500 back for money that they previously put out. So I'm going to say they're really not making that money; they're making it back. The town would be getting $6,000, and I think that Civico would be getting about $20,000. So if I do that right, Civico is getting about 80% on the cash flow, and the town is getting about 20, somewhere around there on year one. As I said, I have not, and presumably if the cash flow goes up in year two, Winchester's cash flow goes up as well. And, Winchester is going to be, presumably the town is going to be getting their money back for their, for the $500,000 affordable housing trust loan. So that's the best answer I can give you without getting into my numbers and without doing that, that year 15 analysis.
I appreciate that, but I think it would be important to get a better grip on it. So maybe when you have a chance to get the data off your machine, maybe we can get, I don't know if we can get an email to us or maybe at the next meeting. But and am I right in my assumption that it's like 20,000 to the builder, 6,000 to the town on a project this size?
In year one, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say to you is that year one, the first cash flow is not why affordable housing developers do affordable housing deals. They do it because it's important to the community. It's important to society. They do it because they get some developer fees that kind of, pay for their overhead till they get to the next deal. And they do it for, getting a little bit of money out when there's a capital event after the tax credit period, which is not for 15 years.
Lynn, thanks for that. Enzo has a hand up and also has to leave on the sooner side. So Enzo, why don't you go ahead?
Sorry about that.
No worries. Enzo, why don't you go ahead with your question?
Thank you. So I think those numbers are interesting. when I look at the existing pro forma that Civico had in their deal, their numbers are considerably higher than what you came up with. Is that what were the major differences? Did you compare
Yeah.
Civico's? I'm sure you did, right?
I got my spreadsheet open. I know for sure we raised the real estate taxes $50,000 or $40,000. I also know that we got rid of the $108,000 in parking income.
Right.
So, you know, and so those were two. So you had an expense increase and an income decrease. And I'm sure there were, a few other nuances, along the way. But that's what I'm looking at here. And so I was just going to quickly look at year 2. So it was like year 2, the town's 10% goes up to about 7,400. So that's another $600. And so, yeah, it's part of it is because they can't just put all the money in their pocket. They have to, their soft debt is, if there's money for us, we want it. You don't have to give it to us, but if there's money, we want it. So they may not have brought it all the way. I don't know if they brought it all the way down to the bottom line that I brought it to. So it's possible that all you were looking at was NOI and not kind of everything that happened under that. I don't know.
Sorry, thank you for that, Lynn. So we have 2. I see Pat and I see Stephanie. We're going to take those 2. We have a few more minutes here, so we'll take those 2. Pat, why don't you go first? You had your hand up a while ago.
Yeah, I think mine are pretty basic. I just want to make sure I understand Enzo's question. So, Lynn, is it safe to assume that the revenue has dramatically changed from what was initially thought by the selectmen when they chose this project?
I can't say that it has changed significantly. I think that the numbers that we're working with right now are accurate as to what we're working with today. And I think that there's been the ability to offset the parking income with changing the unit mix by bringing in the tax credit equity. So in that sense, the developer is still paying $1 million for the property, and they are still able to meet the other obligations that they've agreed to under the LDA, which is the 10% supplemental base fee.
Okay, and then my second one quickly, because I know Brian's keeping moving. I did do some research related to the parking component, and this leads into a question, but John Moriarty did pay $3.5 million for the 2 gas stations he bought downtown. Hard to say how many spaces, but it looks like 12, maybe 15 spaces for $3.5 million, and really not a lot of development potential. I'm wondering, what did Civico say to the proposal of taking the cash and pulling the garage out of the development?
I didn't get that far because it was very clear to me, maybe not to everybody else from the conversation last week, that the parking lot, and Beth can, I'm sure, probably speak to this a little bit more, that the parking lot in question wasn't actually developable. So we didn't go down that road. I understand that there were turning radius and a whole bunch of issues. That's the way I interpreted the conversation. I thought it was more important to see whether or not we could make sure the 40 spaces they committed to could be built, and we were able to accomplish that with a little bit of a change in the unit mix.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't, even if we got to, like, I think what it is, $2.8 million or whatever, I don't think we could build another 40 spaces somewhere in town for that amount of money.
Thank you. Stephanie, why don't you go ahead?
Just really quickly on the point you made, Pat. I do think it's important, even though it's not showing up in the numbers that Lynn had up right there, but like, it's important to remember that the revenue numbers came down because the tax number, in part because the tax numbers went up, and that's to the town. So we can't lose sight of that. And then my second thing is just going to be, Lynn, would you be comfortable sending us your whole Excel document? I would love the opportunity to trace this through if that's
something. Yeah, I've got to see if I can get permission from Civico. It's not my property to share. And
Got
I
it.
think, the hardest thing with numbers is they change, and I'm sure Bill can attest to this. Development numbers change every single day. So I will make that request and see what they're comfortable sharing. Happy to do that.
I think there's a even though we're a little past 5:23, I would like to open it up if there was one more question. Okay, Enzo took it.
Sorry, I have to follow up. So the numbers you're developing, I thought, why would you say they're Civico numbers? Ultimately, these are you're employed by the town, right? So I would think that what the analysis you're providing is for the town. I thought those are our numbers. Are they not?
Every developer's numbers, they have, the way that they calculate numbers is proprietary to their company. So I don't want to, they may have a particular form that in way that they want to deliver the numbers without all of their formulas and things like that. So because it's their work product, not mine, all I did was review them. I need to ask them permission as to what they're comfortable sharing.
Bill, is this
Just a quickie following on from Enzo. You are representing the town exclusively, Lynn, and do you other times typically represent developers more than municipalities? Are you
On the
typically?
financial review, I tend to represent developers. I'm not developers. I'm sorry. I represent municipalities on the financial reviews.
I find it very odd that if you're representing a town exclusively in this situation, though, why if you have information being given to the town for your study, and there's a committee here and someone has looked for information about those numbers, it seems rather particularly strange that you wouldn't feel comfortable in sharing that information with that member. I promise I won't ask for them because I wouldn't do them justice.
I have not said that I'm not going to share them. I've said that I'm going to ask for permission and make sure
I heard
they're
that.
in a format that the developer is not sharing
I'm just
proprietary information. They're not my numbers. I reviewed them.
Okay, I won't take any more time, but I still find it hard to pick. But anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
okay? So this is actually this next section that we're getting into is the long-term oversight by the funders, investors, and lenders, which is actually back to Lynn. So we will keep moving with Lynn on this slide. Lynn, go ahead.
Sure. So the long-term oversight, I'm just going to speak to what lenders look like. And you may or may not recall from my last presentation or my last memo that one of the items that push costs up for affordable developments is the multiple layers of funding. Because everybody who puts money into this wants to be reported to. And they all have a different set of requirements of what they're looking for. And, what's missing from this list is also, again, the zoning oversight. The town is going to have a say in how this is zoned. And those permits are going to be around in perpetuity. And there's going to be obligations that go with those, depending on which way that, what kind of permit is used for it. But generally, looks like it's different. Hang on one sec. I'm sure I'm on the right page here. So basically, funding agencies, state agencies, tax credit investors, they're all going to be looking for annual reviews and affordability compliance. And what this means essentially is that the people that are the households that are living in the affordable units, when they first go to rent the units, they are going to be income checked. And then every year on the anniversary of their occupancy of the units, they will be income checked again. And income checked is only 2 words, but there's a lot that is reviewed when you're trying to ensure that the household occupying the unit has the appropriate income to occupy that unit. The other thing that happens, down at the facility level is that basically the federal government sets the rents every year. And so once a year, the rents are going to change. And those also need to be approved by the regulatory agencies as well. So on the asset management side, typically the lenders are going to go in, their asset management team is going to go in at least once a year to look at the quality and the maintenance of the building. Oftentimes every 5 years or so, they may go in and do an entire capital needs assessment because they want to make sure that the reserves that they're keeping for the property are large enough to address any expected capital needs. In addition, there is a whole financial reporting side of things where everybody pretty much, most likely the subsidizing agency, if it's permitted through a 40B, and your lender and all of your subordinate lenders are going to want to have an annual financial report that basically shows the books of the project. So once a year, the accountants for the project will do an actual audit and publish a report. And that report goes also to a lot of different agencies. I talked a little bit about the periodic capital needs assessments. During construction, hopefully all the lenders will get together and they will choose one construction inspector. That inspector may be out there weekly, they may be out there monthly. That inspector is going to make sure that what is in the architectural plans is actually being built on site. And they're also going to make sure that the money that's coming out, those construction draws, every time you ask to be reimbursed for something, that work has actually been done. So that happens during the construction period. And also, most likely, the investors that are investing the tax credit equity are going to actually want the borrowers or their borrowing entity to provide guarantees, whether they're personal, whether they're for repayment, for carrying cost, completion guarantees. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of guarantees that the lenders ask for because they want to make sure the project's going to get to the finish line and that it's going to be safe. And somebody needs to be on the hook for that. In addition, all of the lending documents, much if you've done your own home mortgage, there's going to be an insurance requirement on the property and minimums for, liability, for property insurance, for, you name it. There is insurance for that. So that will be in place. Sometimes there's a requirement that the developer maintain an aggregate net worth. They can't get below a certain amount in case, again, there's an unlikely event. There's someone's pocket to go into. It's a little bit more seen on the market rate side than I would say on the affordable side. And I think we talked a little bit about reserves last time, that they're going to want money to pay for operations of the facility until they get to break even, because day one, you're not going to be fully occupied, but you still need to pay your maintenance worker, your marketing person, your management person. So there's a lease up reserve until you get to kind of that break even, meaning you've got enough money to pay your bills. And then there's typically a capital improvement reserve as well. I think there's a little bit of repetition on this slide. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why, but anyway, let me just make sure from my other slide here that everything is in here that I think makes sense. So you're going to have an investor that's going to be overseeing things. You're going to have a lender that's going to be overseeing things. You're going to have a town that's going to be overseeing things at various points in the process, but there's always going to be eyes and ears on the project. So I'm going to flip, I think we're ready, Brian, to go to the next slide. And I think that, let's just see what's in this slide. So basically, I think Marty is going to talk to
You want
this
me to-
slide,
Yep,
correct?
Yep, I can jump in. Thank you,
Okay,
Lynn.
thank you.
The goal of this slide is really just to pick out some of the many things that are already negotiated in the land disposition agreement and in that exhibit to the land disposition agreement that outlines some of the terms of the lease. So the town, in negotiating those before town meeting, thought it was important to address things like management and operations and make sure that if there's a change in the companies involved, right? Civico proposed a certain management company. If there's a change, the town will be able to consent to the change in the management company to make sure they meet our requirements. They will have to submit financial statements to the town as well on an annual basis, because that's how we're going to be able to review and validate what the sharing is of the cash flow and to see how the development's operating. Obviously, the affordability restrictions are in many places. They're in all the lending documents, and they're in probably the zoning, and they'll also be in the ground lease where those can't change without the town consent. The ownership of the building, the developer cannot just transfer this building to anybody willy-nilly. The town has approval rights if there's going to be a transfer of the property. And there can't be any transfers until they've performed and actually built and completed the building that they propose. So that will be in place. And then there are also certain requirements about building use. They can't just change the use of the building or make major physical changes that are significant without getting the town's consent. When the ground lease is done, there'll be lots more details in here. And there are also other items, as Lynn mentioned above, like insurance. The town certainly wants to make sure that building is insured as well. So those will also be in the ground lease. So Brian, you go to the next slide. This one, I actually, and you guys had a chance to read this. It's what was sent out in the draft before the meeting. This is really just quoting the ground lease exhibit that's in the land disposition agreement that makes it clear the developer is responsible for maintaining the property, repairing the property, all parts of the property, including the structural systems, the utilities, and keeping the building in good condition over time. That's a requirement that's in the ground lease. As you all know, the way a ground lease is structured, the town actually gets the building back at the end. And there will be requirements in the ground lease that the developer cannot let the building run into the ground and stop maintaining it. It will have to come back to the town in a good condition. So there will be more details about that language in the ground lease, but the town has the ability in the ground lease to be able to make sure the building is maintained on an ongoing basis. And I would just add, Lynn had quite an extensive list of all of the inspections, the reports, the other things the public agencies will be requiring. And to the extent those are public lenders, the town could certainly ask the developer and those lenders to make sure that the town receives those reports and inspections as well, because the developer will be doing these anyway. They'll be doing capital needs studies. They'll be looking at that, and the town has an interest in that because of the long-term involvement between the town and this developer, which is clearly very different than a private building that is built, and once it's built, then it's really just the town looking at building codes and not having this level of oversight. So at a high level, there's a lot that's been negotiated already. There's still details that will be to be negotiated when the detailed ground lease gets done. And I think we have, hopefully, Brian, a minute or two for questions about, are there other areas that the town should be thinking about adding to oversight, or any questions about these particular areas?
Good question.
Yes, Paul, go ahead. And then Pat.
Okay. So I've heard a lot about, paper thin margins of profit, which sound very unrealistic, but I understand as going along, I'm learning a lot of things. What protection do we have if this builder just says, because he's not coming up with a lot of skin in the game, what protection do we have if we just decide to say, I'm done, I'm walking away, I'm bankrupt, or I just throwing my hat, taking my ball and going home? What's our recourse, and what's our protection?
So I think that's more of a lawyer's question, and I will not try to play lawyer. There are definitely protections in the lease that we can, specifically make the developer make certain improvements. I think one of the things that is different about affordable housing is while the cash margins are thin, the requirements by the agencies that before people take any cash flow out, they fund reserves to keep the building in good shape, is a different kind of protection, right? So that those capital reserves and operating reserves that are required to be in there will be there to pay for maintenance and to pay for operations. And I think the other kind of non-lawyer answer from my experience in affordable housing, if the building needs something, there is a significant interest on the part of the public agencies to work with the developer and the town to find the resources to fix what's needed in the building if that happens. So, the town is not kind of on its own. And if the developer's not performing, the town won't be on its own. Those agencies will be around the table as well, wanting to make sure the building is operated and maintained the way it needs to be.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that, that you also have an investor that has deep pockets and an interest there for that first 10 years and that 5-year look back, and they're not gonna want to see anything, happen with that for, as I said, sort of kind of every cycle that you go through.
Right, and there'll be new investors in year 15 or 20 that come in the same way.
Oh yeah, they all need the building to be up and operational.
Hold on, just a second. Paul, just a second. I'm going to let Mina. I'm going to let Mina. If you wanted to jump in, I wanted to let Mina say something. Then we are going to go to Patrick and then to Sumya. Mina, did you have anything to add?
Not a whole lot. I mean, the land development agreement and the term sheet that's included in it for the lease have several provisions that would hold the Civico, and this would be true of any land development agreement we negotiate, in default if they don't meet construction timelines, if they fail to construct, there is you hold back some of the money if you can, and basically have a way to do that. The ultimate thing is if they default and you terminate, you can start over. You can turn the project over to someone else. So the short answer is there's a couple of protections in the lease and the land development agreement, just like any other development.
Thanks, Mina. Patrick?
I don't want to ruin the party, but this is a long list, and I'm sitting here thinking, we haven't even finished parking or revenue. We had 20 minutes to review. We still have open parking issues, open revenue issues. This could be a 2-hour discussion here, and now we're being told, at the end of this, we're going to spend 20 minutes to plan the last meeting to write the report. And I just feel I'm going to be completely unprepared to write that report. I don't think it's practical, at least for me. I can't speak for everyone. I'm going to be completely unprepared to make any sort of recommendation. We're still waiting for more financial numbers. We still don't really know the parking garage. Best answer is fine but has anyone looked at any other sites? Is there any other option? Will the developer give us the money? There's so many open questions, and now this list is massive, and we've got 20 minutes to make a decision and make a recommendation to the town. I'm just being blunt, and I'm probably going to aggravate some people, but this is just way too fast and not practical for us to really do a good job of what we're supposed to do, and I don't want to do that.
So the only thing I can say is that the charge before this task force was given with a timeline. It's obviously not my timeline, your timeline. It's the timeline that has been given to us. If someone from the select board wanted to change that, that would have been something that they could have done. Unfortunately, this is the situation that we're in terms of highlighting the concerns that everybody has. We're not here to figure out, this is from the select board, again, if you look at the charge, to negotiate for them. We're here to get everyone's concerns written down on paper. So I'm going to go to Sumya and then to Stephanie, and we'll keep moving forward.
Brian, I'm sorry. I just want to interject for 15 seconds and say that, this committee should have gotten an email from me adding 2 one-hour working sessions. So certainly if we need more time, I can send out more doodle polls with more potential dates for this group to meet.
Thanks for that. Sumya?
And Brian, Paul asked my question, so I'll put my hand down.
Sure. Stephanie?
I think this might be a question from Marty. As part of the capital reviews, can you go into just a little bit more detail about what aspects of the building, what parts of the building are the state or the public lenders, like just can you go down a little deeper into what those inspections will entail?
So there are two different pieces, and Lynn could probably answer that too. I mean, one are annual inspections where they basically walk the building, they look in units, they get a sense of how well it's maintained. They're, looking for, is the building in good condition? The capital needs studies are something that's a little different, and those happen as a planning tool and reacting to the conditions in the building. Lynn, do you want to go over kind of what a capital needs study is?
Sure. I think, what happens yearly is more of a visual inspection. They'll open the door, they'll look in the mechanical rooms, they'll go on the roof, we'll kind of a kicking of the tires of the building. And they probably also will probably look at, some of the income reviews, and, they'll pick some administrative stuff to kind of peek at while they're there as well. The capital improvements assessments are basically, they have anywhere from 5 to 10 categories that they will look at, and it's quite amazing. They'll take pictures of everything from top to bottom. They'll have a report on the HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, and they'll have like 30 line items underneath that. And they'll have the outdoor conditions like the pavement and the landscaping. They'll have the shell of the building, meaning the siding and the roof. So they take kind of all of the different parts of a building, report on all of it, take pictures, and then they basically do over like a 20-year period, when is that going to need to be fixed? And then they fill in the cost of what it is to actually fix those items, so that every year they know how much money they're going to need. So it's just a more formal process that is more detailed, but it's really informative for the lenders and for the developers, so that they know if they've got enough money should expected things arise. Meaning, like you don't know if a hurricane's going to hit, sort of thing.
And those are done by third-party inspectors, and the public agencies have certain approved lists of approved inspectors, so that whoever does this capital needs review has to be somebody that the agencies have approved as capable of doing it.
Thanks for that. Bill, you had a hand up?
I did, and I'm going to like to go back to Marty's comments, and she talked about the number of people who will be auditing and watching, and eyes and ears everywhere, and implying that there'd be all kinds of supervision. And did that apply also? I think I heard it from somebody that it applied very much to the makeup of the consumer base, the occupants of the building, that there'd be verification of the ongoing their eligibility to continue, that their income was right. Is that your understanding?
Yes, those are required to be annually recertified. So residents have to have their income certified on an annual basis for the affordable units. The market rate units don't have to do that.
Are these similar to the ABCD units, so to speak?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure what those are.
Well, I'm thinking under affordable housing for a friendly 40B. In that situation, we've got quite a number of units of that nature in Marlboro, And I recall the situation there is absolutely no monitoring of anything, and indeed strong admonitions against bothering the residents with asking them for proof and possibly hectoring them.
Well,
Yeah,
what's 40Bs are sometimes different, Bill, because 40Bs sometimes are not monitored by anybody other than the town because they are not funded by the agencies that are funding these kinds of affordable housing developments that are targeted for incomes lower than 80% of median income. So Lynn, you want to add to that, but they can be
yeah,
very,
I mean,
very different.
I think that there it was the wild west up until about 10 years ago with regard to monitoring 40Bs and who the monitor was. I'd like to think that the newer projects have a lot more oversight on them. But LIHTC projects, the tax credit investor have very, very rigid requirements because the project needs to be in compliance. If they're just one unit short, the credit's not there. So they are absolutely positively 100% income certified, every single year based on the investors. They should be looked at once a year and reported to the regulatory agencies that permits them. And their construction or permanent lenders are also going to want to see that information.
Well, one closing
it's an
comment.
IRS requirement.
One closing comment, Lynn, in the 16 or 18 years that those units have been operated, there was no audit at the beginning. There's never been anyone who ever asked about income for anybody in any building. And again,
I can't speak to that, but this is not that.
It says something about how things,
different animal.
it does say something about how things work, and I don't get a whole lot of confidence from that experience that the experience here would be a whole lot different. And I also don't know how the town, what budget the town is going to take the cost of its oversight from. If it's going to be reporting and doing things, it doesn't sound like the town has a lot of money to get outside consultants to do it, and the town doesn't have in-house people to do it. So that would be my concern. That, and I won't take any more on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that just kind of a little bit more. There will be documents that there will be an affirmative fair marketing resident selection plan required at closing. There will be a regulatory agreement that will be put in place. Presumably that the lenders and the tax credit investors will sign on to a whole host of documents. And as far as if the town needs money for oversight, then that's something that they can write into their permit. I don't think the town is going to be the monitor. I think the town is going to be reported to. But I do have one town that I monitor their rental units, and there was money written into their agreement that the developer pays them money every year to oversee it. I wouldn't take it off the table, but I think there are a lot of people that are going to be in line before the town, and you just want to make sure that whoever is doing the monitoring is getting the reports to the town, so the town gets its level of comfort.
Right.
I think the town's best leverage and most cost-effective leverage is to build relationships with these agencies that are funding and lending, so that they know, they go to the agencies and make them do it, is what I'm saying, because that's what should happen. And if it's not happening, the town can make it happen that way.
Thanks, Marty. I'm gonna interject it just for a minute. So I think the concern is clearly been labeled. Stephanie, do you have something related specifically to long-term oversight, which is still the one we're on at the moment?
I was just going to ask that we raise concerns based on the documents before us and the expertise that's being shared with us specifically about the funding structure of this deal, including the low-income housing tax credit program, and not try to apply an experience in a different town with a completely different structure in 40B to this, because those don't seem apples to apples, and I don't think it's fair to take a confidence or lack of confidence from a completely different completely different situation and apply it to what would happen in this town with these documents.
Okay, noted. We are now just gonna, I guess then that leads right from the long-term oversight, even though the mix of affordable units is talked about. Marty, really quick here. Really quick here, we'll start with this slide and I'll just go right to you, kind of a very small refresher on why the Commonwealth is serious about affordable housing.
Yeah, this was just, I mean, we've talked about this before, and I think all of you have done your homework in looking at the housing production plan. This just reminds all of us that we're trying to get to 10%. That's our goal of units that qualify for the housing, subsidized housing inventory, as it is a goal for every community in the Commonwealth. And we all know that our housing prices and rents here keep going up and up and up and up, and that we have a significant number of people who live in Winchester who qualify for and need affordable housing. We're making some progress on our subsidized housing inventory. You know, we're at 1.9% of our housing stock now that's built and occupied by people who qualify. The two developments, River Street and Cambridge Street, which were approved by 40B but haven't started construction yet, those will add about 3% to our inventory. And then all the Waterfield units will count on the subsidized housing inventory because, you know, more than 25% of them are available to people above, below 80% of median income, and that'll add another 0.7. So, you know, we're making progress, but this is just kind of a reminder of some of those numbers that we all in the town track to try to keep us moving toward our 10% goal for affordable housing. And then this just a reminder about what's in the Civico deal. Again, it's mixed income housing, which was important to be able to try to create a diverse housing environment. And I think, as we've talked about on the financing side, having a mixture of affordable and market rate allows a developer to access a wide variety of financial resources to get the deal built. And having mixed income housing does have some value because it's not on all low income development. It has a real mix of people, and that's, I think, important for us as a community. You know, the significant number of restricted units helps us meet our housing production plan goals and housing diversity goals. And also, because it's at the train station, provides a location that's a great location for people of all incomes. And the chart on the right just gives a reminder about the mix of units currently in the Civico original proposal. We have talked about whether or not there might be an adjustment to that to access some additional resources. I do need to correct my statement here that they proposed the highest number of affordable units. There actually was another proposal that provided 75% affordable housing. So Civico was second in terms of the number of affordable units that would be available. So that's just at a high level where we are on affordable housing. And I think we have a little time for Q&A. Brian, you're watching the clock.
I did actually, just if you don't mind, I wanted to jump in and say why I don't think, you know, why I was suggesting that, you know, the 8 units at 80% move down to the 60%. I think it's because I believe there are other 40Bs in town that are hitting that 80% mark. Most 40Bs hit the 80% mark. So I think that it's harder, as you can tell by, you know, what Marty and I have been talking about tonight. It's so much harder to produce that housing at the 60% level, and that really is your workforce housing. So I think not only would it be beneficial to the pro forma, I think it would be beneficial to the community as well.
Thanks for that, Lynn. Yes, Paul, why don't you go ahead?
So I've been trying to jump in here, and I don't want to regress, but I can't let the comments go after Patrick spoke. I really do believe, and I said this from the first reading, that this task force not only has a duty to look at the data and make recommendations, but it has to be done in the proper way. And it's not a speed dating contest, because if it isn't, the community is going to just feel like they're forced down a rabbit hole again, and we're going to end up in the same spot we were. And I would suggest that we at least ask the select board if more time is needed, that they grant it to us. Because I, for one, believe that they're split on that. I think that a couple of them at least are in the same camp, that as long as it takes to get it right, rather than to do it fast, that's the most important thing. So I find it a little insulting every time. We have 10 minutes to discuss this. Let's move on. Feel like we're just kicking the can down the road. So we have to be careful we don't end up in the same spot we were just a few months ago. So I just wanted to add that, but thank you.
Stephanie?
I don't disagree with the concern. We are being asked to do a lot of hard work very quickly. And I think we said in the first meeting, I said, we should absolutely bring this to a special meeting, of town meeting if needed. Could we all just agree, Brian's powerless, right? There's nothing that Brian or Lisa can do. I think the goal was to get through, not a speed dating, but just let's get through these topics so that we've at least been given the primer on them. Let's listen to Marty and Lynn. I propose, Paul, and then we have working sessions next week. And I think that's when we'll have a much better sense. I'm hoping we'll have more time to talk and really debate there. But maybe let's just let Brian be our timekeeper and then reopen that topic, which I think is an important question. But I'm just proposing, can we let them get through the agenda tonight and dig back into that the next time we speak in a few days?
I agree with you. That's common sense. But all I heard was, oh, that's what the select board decided, so that's what we have to go with. I know that they can have another discussion and change their mind and do it right this time. And we're going to have an interim town manager in just a few weeks here. A lot of changes, a lot of opportunities to get it right this time. So I appreciate Stephanie. Thank you.
Any questions related to the mix of affordable housing, which was the current topic that we're on? Stephanie.
Sorry, I'm talking a lot right now. Not a question, but I just wanted to state the affordability is the highest priority for me and for the residents group that I was put on here to represent. We've talked a lot about revenue, a lot, and a lot about parking. And I just feel like it needs to be said that this is government-owned land. It is not private corporation-owned land. And the purpose of a government is not solely to make money. And so I would ask that we at least be open to the idea that the numbers that Marty showed and the improvement toward state mandated affordable housing goals, not to mention the betterment of our town and the increased diversity to our town. I've heard everyone say, I'm all for affordable housing. I'm all for affordable housing. That's not enough to say unless our actions line up to it. And if we end up in a place that basically tanks this project because we didn't feel like the town was getting enough more money from it than what it's making today, which is virtually nothing, it's hard to align the statement that we're all for affordable housing if we're not willing to. We should be looking at this as an investment by the town into the future, into affordability, into diversity, and not an investment that comes with only financial returns. I know not everyone's necessarily going to agree with that, but I wanted to make that very clear as my stance. So as we go into these conversations, even clear on where everyone stands on revenue, that's where I stand on affordability.
And I agree with this, Stephanie. I haven't heard one person in this group say they're not for it, but you're right. Actions speak louder than words. And I kind of disagree with you that this is government owned. This is property of every taxpayer in Winchester. So we have to get it right for them. And I think we can have the best of both worlds where we don't have to break the bank. Matter of fact, if we utilize this property correctly, we could probably get more affordable units, maybe in other spots, including this spot. But I think we need a little mixed antipasto here, rather than trying to force something that might not work. So I think we have to keep an open mind in that aspect also. But I agree with you, open mind and discussion and see where it lands.
Patrick, about the mix of affordable housing?
Yeah, and Stephanie, I think the chamber's been a strong advocate for that. But if you create something to the detriment of the downtown, and I'm really focused on parking. I mean, I haven't really argued about much else, but we have a developer that's going to spend $2.8 million to build a garage. We can take $2.8 million. We shouldn't shut down because if it doesn't fit in one place or another place. Because if you eliminate parking downtown and you create the problems that the retailers think you're going to cause, you're going to have a beautiful building with people in it and no stores. And I don't think that that's what the town wants. Half the town or more than the town voted no on this. And the people I know didn't vote no because of the affordable piece. They're all for the affordable piece. They voted no because they felt like there was other factors in this. And especially from the business community, it's related to taking what, from my math, we're going to lose over 250 spaces downtown, not even including where residents park from all these developments. And no one spent 5 minutes on it to figure it out. So you could bankrupt the town and have no stores. And we're fighting to put people downtown when there's going to be no downtown left. So you shouldn't be defensive about the affordable component. At least from my side, we're all behind you on that. And it's more about, you have to be careful you don't cause, they say everything you do creates something else somewhere. The parking could create a lot of issues that there's not much of a town left. And I don't think that's going to really accomplish what everybody wants to accomplish.
I don't think Stephanie was being defensive. She was just saying that that's very important to her. I do feel that the units would bring foot traffic to the downtown stores as well. Just because with the active units there, people would likely go to the downtown stores.
Thank you, Sumya. We still have, if anyone wants to talk about the mix of affordable units or issues or concerns related to it, or ideas on why and if we should change the mix or anything related to that, now is the time to bring it up.
I have a question, Ben. Has the financial firm looked at a different mix where it could generate more revenue for us?
Yes, that has been answered. One way was changing 8 units of the 80% to 60 that could offer $250,000 up front. So that is one way. Bill, you have your hand up.
My question was very much along the same lines as how affordable do these units need to be in order for all of the units to be counted?
All of them are going to count anyway because they are rental. So all 60 would count simply because more than 25% are at the 80% and below. But the idea and Lynn can speak to this more, but the idea is that there were 8 units at the 80% level. And if we change those to the 60% level, that would offer a one-time upfront. Lynn, continue then.
No. With the loss, the deal that's on the table right now is that if the 8 units become 80% units, the developer can bring equity into the project to cover the loss in the parking income. So there is the 250,000, went away between my last report and this report because the developer is not going to have revenue from the parking because there's not at the moment contemplated commuter parking.
All right, so let's get to the bottom of that. Bill, does anyone else have questions related to that, and to make sure everyone understands what's going on there?
My question really revolved at what kind of a mix would there be funds that could be allocated to somehow create more parking in the community? Does it need to be, how affordable do they need to be to reach that goal? It's one thing to say that we want them to add to the inventory and change the inventory from what I think I heard from Lynn was a total of 4.9% with the current projects that have been approved and are pending and expected to come forth, would bring us to a total of 4.9% affordable units in total. Is that accurate?
Yep, right around there.
That's about right.
Yeah. And if we wouldn't get any more units, but if we made it less onerous for the business community, and when I talk about the business community, I'm not talking about my business community, so to speak, other than as a homeowner and 50-year resident, because I have no commercial interest whatsoever in any real estate, nor have I ever, other than the home that we live in. So I feel very not compromised by having any personal gain there. But that's the question, I think, is, and I have to, all I've heard, think of that as being a very, very critical aspect of this whole thing.
Are you asking if there is a different way to structure the deal so that the town would get more parking or that the town would get more revenue?
Or if more revenue would be generated and made available, Lynn, so that more parking could be created somewhere else. If we can get rid of that major problem.
Well, I think that the developer has worked hard to try and provide the 40 replacement parking spaces. And that if you add more cost to the project off-site, I don't have an answer for you. I feel like we've worked hard to make the project work as currently structured and keep the revenue. We've increased the real estate taxes to the town. We've decreased the payback for, you know, there's a bunch of trade-offs that have been made to get to this point. But I think if you're asking the question, is there more money in this project for the developer to give to create parking elsewhere? I'm not aware of that, you know, that today.
If the developer had more income prospects or units that would be sold, would be leased at market, the developer every year would have substantially more income. There's no question about that.
Yeah, the issue with I don't want to go too far down, too far down the road with this. The issue with adding more units is that you need more parking. And therefore you have to pay to build, that parking. And if you're building more parking for the units, it's one thing. If you're building more parking for the town, there needs to be revenue.
Can I jump in, Lynn? Can I make a clarifying question? Bill, are you asking about adding units net above the 60, or are you asking about making less of the 60 affordable and therefore more market rate?
The question is predicated on the former, I'm sorry, the latter, Stephanie, of making.
You're trying to change the percentage, go closer down to that 25%.
And primarily because we continue to talk about how many units have to be there in order to get them all to qualify. But when it doesn't seem to matter that we're putting a lot more as affordable than are needed to qualify the whole building. And so to the extent that it's and it doesn't address the issue of more affordable units. It goes very much to the mandatory percentage, though.
Yeah, if you get rid of the affordable units, you lose the equity that's coming in, that's helping to subsidize building the parking garage.
So do you think you lose money for every market rate unit you change, or is it kind of break even? Do you have a sense? I haven't looked at the numbers. I think you kind of lose money, but because you have so much money coming in from the low income tax credit, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, you also have limited parking for the market rate units. And I say that not because it may not be enough. I think it's fine. It's just that you get revenue from having parking. So if you're building parking for someone else and you're not getting the revenue, what is it that you're gaining?
Right.
I don't think it's unreasonable that we should know, what does a market unit create versus what does an affordable create, at least just from, Enzo must be squirming because I assume he needs to know to protect the town. But I think about things like, why is the Chamber of Commerce building preserved? To me, could you add more units or more parking there? Could you sacrifice some open space to add more parking? If you get the resident garage out of there, the town garage, that's at least 2.2 million. And if you could change revenue a little bit for this guy, maybe there's $4 million that they can give the town. And then Beth can figure out where she can put it, or we can spend some effort to figure out where to put it. And you end up with a better project with potentially more affordable. And you end up with a garage to solve that problem, and you get it, at least put that part of the garage out of the building.
All right, so Pat makes a point where that it's possible that we could use more of the building footprint from the Chamber of Commerce building to create more units. That you're talking about potentially, policy direction / negotiating at the negotiating level. That's something to think about. It sounds like everyone's saying no, we want more affordable housing, but also there's a mix of some are saying there is a less, and that potentially less affordable units could provide more annual revenue. So these are the things that you're going to be writing in the report. Enzo and then Beth.
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify there because I mean, I guess if you had less affordable units, I guess it's very counterintuitive to me. So are you saying, Lynn, that the tax incentives are so great that if you had, let's say, 15 affordable units instead of 40 and 45 market units, that it would be less revenue because the tax incentives are so significantly better?
That's an extreme example, and I don't feel comfortable answering that question.
Because Enzo, I think where Bill's going, and sorry to just jump in, if that is the case, then maybe the answer is adding more affordable and less market.
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out, Lynn.
Enzo, the answer is that there's a sweet spot somewhere. Okay, we're not going to figure out that sweet spot right now. The idea is that that's another lever the select board and the negotiating team should use to potentially get more revenue or get more units.
Agree, Brian, but that without doing the analysis of looking at those different spots along the curve, it's hard for us to find that sweet spot, right? So if you want us to look at that, I mean, look at the task force has to look at what the mix of affordability is. That I think having that, I don't understand why Lynn wouldn't put that together for us.
Okay. Well, I can't answer that.
I think we should talk about that. Let me just make one other point, though. I think if the charge is to figure out a way to renegotiate with Civico to get the deal done and accomplish all these other goals, because of the RFP, the range we would need to be looking in, and I'm looking to Mina to make sure this is correct, you would not be able to go below 51% affordable, because that was sort of the benchmark of the RFP. So
and to make a tax credit deal work, you really can't do less than 40 units. So there's a sweet spot in affordable housing tax credit deals too. Yeah. I mean, I can't say what was in their head and how they ended up with 40 affordable and 20 market, but I would suspect that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. So in that range, that's a question.
Right. So
Marty, as a task force member, I think our job is to make the best recommendations we can make, whether they fit in the Civico, like Paul says, a round peg in a square hole. I don't feel like that's my concern or my job. That's the selectman's job. Our job is to make a good decision on what things can make this project fly with the town. And with all these walls up on data or just unprovided data, you're asking us to make a decision that we're not going to be able to make a really good decision. If we're in a box on what changes the RFP, then why do we even have this committee? It's already over and done. Just give it back to the selectmen and let them go do what they want to do.
If that's what you want to put in your report, that's fine. Beth?
Sorry.
Sorry.
I have a clarifying question, Beth. I don't want to, you might be going back to something else. In terms of ordering, Brian, I just had one clarifying question on what Pat just said.
So this is exactly why we talked at the end of the first meeting about we're not talking about the charge anymore. So we're exactly where we are, where we said we shouldn't be, and everyone agreed that we're not going to be talking about the charge. We seem to be talking about the charge a lot. I want to keep moving forward because that is what we've been given. Do you have something related to that?
Yeah, I have a question specifically about the line item of mix of affordability and market as a thing we're supposed to prioritize.
Please.
Is our job to, so I feel like there's this blurring happening between that mix and revenue, because you can tinker with the mix and it has changes on revenue. In my understanding was that this line item was how important is it to maximize affordability as a percentage of total, not figure out what the exact percentage should be as part of the deal. Was I right in that interpretation, or are we supposed to be figuring out what the mix is supposed to be?
I think we need to know the data, Stephanie, in order to make that recommendation.
Okay, so then that's a, so for some.
Consultant to give us that information.
Okay. If that still doesn't speak to the priority of one over another, meaning if you're trying to figure out one of the priorities so it works out for another one of priorities, then you just put that priority lower. Meaning that if you want more revenue out of the deal, it's at the cost of something, and maybe it's affordable units, maybe it's not, but that's something that you have to each make. And we're going to go through that. Look, it is Beth's turn to speak. Beth is going to speak right now.
Thanks. Thanks, Brian. I just wanted to circle back on one of the points you made, Pat. So the the large MWA store that runs through the site actually runs underneath the Chamber of Commerce building. So there's some additional costs involved with the demolition of that structure. And that was part of the reason that the MBTA chose not to demolish that building. I can't say for sure what that is, but just so everybody knows, it's not a simple building demolition like you would see in other cases. And just the other piece regarding parking garage locations, I think, going back to 2016 when the select board hired the parking garage consultant to look at locations around town, the goal was to say like, hey, maybe we can do this project without, be able to replicate all of the parking if there's 80 spaces or whatever that we're losing, be able to replicate that somewhere else in town. And I just don't think it works. The sites we have available are all very challenging and difficult and expensive to construct. So I would hate to see us lose the 40 spaces that we are getting out of this project by thinking that we could create them somewhere else in town, because I don't think it's, that's not something that could be done easily or could be done quickly. So we are getting some parking out of this project. Obviously it's less than we'd all like to see, but I'd hate for us to lose that by thinking we might be able to do it ourselves somewhere else, because I can tell you right now, the cost of construction that we're seeing on every single project we have is through the roof. And a private developer who doesn't have to pay prevailing wage can do things a lot cheaper than a town can. Those are the only points I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Beth. There's two more sections that we were trying to get through. I think it's only one now. So I think we should actually take a little straw poll right now and to determine which one we're going to talk about before we talk about the report, and then we work on the rest in those working meetings. So the two topics that we have left to talk about are the.
I'm sorry, Brian. I'm sorry to. So I mean, I can certainly stay on longer to talk about the report structure. I can try to limit that. Can we just do a quick straw poll and maybe see, because it's all on the agenda tonight, to see who can stay a little bit longer than 7, or if there's anybody that has a hard stop? Okay, Beth does. All right, go back, Brian, to the
straw
poll.
So length and conditions of the lease or design. So this is trying to we each have a few slides and then we're going to have a discussion about. Mina Makarios from Anderson Krieger is here about length and conditions of the lease, and then the other one is design. So if we could just say, raise your hand right now if you want to talk about I was going to say if you want to talk about length and conditions of the lease, but I'm guessing, Bill, your hand is up for that. So you can either physically raise it or if you want to do that first. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we're going to go talk about that. So Mina has, let me get these up.
Excuse me, Brian, I didn't raise my hand. I'd like to add a third one because I think it's the elephant in the room, and it's regards the.
Just to be clear, there isn't a third one. There's two. We have two left, and this is what we have to do first. Whatever that is third that you would want would be after that, and that's where we are. I know this may be uncomfortable for everyone in terms of moving at this pace. This is where we are. We're not going to be talking about something other than related to these 6 key priorities. After that, we can talk about whatever anybody wants related to that.
As
So we're
long as we
good.
have time to do that, because this is one of the
I don't know.
problems I have with this is we don't put together the agenda. We're being shoved an agenda, but we're a task force. And obviously that legal document that we all got is very concerning, but we'll go on with the show. Thank you.
Sure. In terms of agenda, yes, welcome to the pool. Here we are. So the length and the conditions of the lease, Mina. So why don't you take it away?
And Brian, with your permission, I can in the course of this explain why the RFP process was chosen, which statute was chosen, because that was what that letter was about.
If you want to address that sounds great.
Sure. Yeah, sure. But let me first start with, I think the question that's come up is, why is the lease the term that it is? And what are the benefits of a ground lease? So we're starting from where the select board and town meeting had this conversation several years ago. I'm not talking about this last town meeting. There was a suggestion initially that this might start off as a sale of the Waterfield lot for a redevelopment for affordable housing purposes. The direction that the select board wanted to go in was a ground lease instead. Ground leases have a few benefits. You can see them here, and we've been talking about a lot of them, and a lot of the issues that you've been talking about in this group have basically focused on these. One is you get a continuous revenue stream. If you sell property, you get the money, and that's it. Two, you have this asset in town, although it's a long-term lease, it remains town property. And should a project fall through, should after 100 years, in the case of what was in the RFP, the town decides to take a different direction, and the affordability restrictions at that point may or may not expire. They usually would be perpetual. You could take a different direction. That's the same sort of as potential to reuse the property at the end of the term. And then the last one that I think was one of the driving factors here is all of these issues about being able to inspect, being able to be there year after year, being able to check on capital improvements that are needed. All of those are easier to do in a lease than a sale. So that's why we went towards a lease. So Brian, you want to add the next slides there? I think we talked about those, so short-term versus long-term. Why 99 years? Well, first of all, the RFP states that. So that was a term in the RFP that was issued by the select board to enter into a 99-year lease with the selected developer. And the developer would be responsible for the construction, redevelopment, operation, and possible operation of a public parking area. To address briefly the points Mr. Martin made in his letter, Mr. Martin called and reached out to us back in July, just before this task force was formed, asking whether the town had solicited price proposals, which he believed was necessary. I pointed Mr. Martin to part of the Inspector General's manual, which points out that you do not need price proposals and for land dispositions and land leases. A couple of weeks later, I heard from him again, asking questions about, well, shouldn't this be under Chapter 30B, Section 6, not 16? To which I responded in August with an explanation that land dispositions, including leases or sales, both of them being true, are governed by Chapter 30B, Section 16. Our firm has litigated one of the leading cases on that recently in Martha's Vineyard. It's been true and it's been found in other cases. And it's consistent with the structure of the statute in NIG's manual. So I don't disagree with the rationale in Mr. Martin's letter. I don't think that that it would be appropriate to say that the lease was improperly, or the RFP, was improperly issued. In addition to that, what Mr. Martin's really getting at in the letter, it appears, is whether or not this is a public project in the sense that it's controlled by the town and ought to be bid out as a public construction project or as a disposition of land. That's where really the distinction he's driving between Section 6 and Section 16. And that actually comes into play right into what we're talking about with the short-term versus long-term. The structure that was in the RFP for a 99-year lease, some courts will go as far as saying a 99-year lease is effectively a disposition. It's effectively a sale of land. You see ground leases of that length all over the place when especially public entities are trying to give the private entity that's going to be taking over the construction, running basically running construction, taking on the risks of construction, taking on the risks of project failure for the most part, as much of a leash as possible. That's where the 99-year lease rationale comes in. And Brian, if you could just fill in the rest of the slide just to make sure I'm not going. There we go. It gives the developer and the town stability for what the site is. It sometimes aids in their financing requirements and infrastructure. It basically gives a private entity everything that a private entity, and a lot of you are in business, would want with the remaining residual control for the town. It's different than a public works project, which would have to be bid out. It wouldn't be bid out under 30B6. It would be bid out under Chapter 149 as a public construction project. But in any event, that's what the distinction would be. And there's basically a multi-factor test of whether it's a private project on public land, which is a disposition of land like a lease, or it's done for the town. In this case, where the ultimate facility is going to be owned and operated by the developer for the length of the 99-year lease with just the ground, the underlying fee owned by the town, it's effectively a private public project. It's a private project on public land with public benefits being the affordable housing and some of the mixed uses, et cetera. So that's where the 99-year lease came from. And then Brian, I think, I just want to make sure I didn't make that. There we go. Yeah. Sometimes it also is a statement, as I was sort of getting to earlier, when an entity wants to say, this is what we want to use the land for long-term, but we don't want to sell it. 99 years is sort of a synonym for the foreseeable future. That's not to say that's the only policy call, and that's not something, we didn't make that policy call. That's where the town and the board have started out. Shorter lease terms could be appropriate, where, for instance, an owner has known contemplated needs for future use and redevelopment is easier. For instance, we represent a lot of airports. We get proposals from tenants all the time who want to do 50, 60-year leases. A lot of times, airports say no because they don't know if they want to redevelop it, how the market will change in a way where they might want to use that land for aeronautical development while it might be good for hangars and or cargo area, really still aeronautical. Owner wants ability to revisit the business deal. Again, when it's more of a business deal, a landlord like the town might decide, we want to be able to revisit this shorter. That's an input that this task force could give the select board. That's kind of a piece of it. And then the third is where the infrastructure itself is integral to the owner's other operations. For instance, if you have a project where the private entity is going to build on public land, something that's going to provide roads or wastewater or something else, you may not want to have the yearly inspections. You might want more frequent check-in if you're going to sort of own it at the end. Here, what is being owned at the end of the project is essentially housing. And as long as the town has the ability to monitor that and make sure it's working appropriately, a longer term lease may be appropriate. Again, it's a judgment call. It's a policy call of how long the town wants it. The query I would have for the task force and as you think about the length of term would be, what is the likelihood the town would want to own a mixed use housing, residential, commercial building at the end of a shorter term? Again, if you're saying 99 years, you're sort of thinking of it as a synonym for letting it be somebody else's issue for the long term. If you're thinking of a shorter term, there's more of a likelihood you get it back. There's no right or wrong to that, but that's the policy determination that was made. The 99-year lease was material to the RFP. So I would just say, and whether this is a little bit, I know, different than what the charge of this group was. If the feedback is we really think that a shorter lease term is appropriate, you're probably looking at a new RFP, which, just to circle back to Paul's point that he raised, because I think it's important so that folks are on the same page of what I see in that letter. It may be, first of all, while I disagree with Mr. Martin's analysis, it may be premature in any event if the select board takes your advice and says we can't get from here to there without going to a new RFP, and so you wouldn't really be worried about the one from last year anyway. That's the select board's call at the end of the day, what they want to do with that input.
Thanks for that, Mina. So now questions to anyone related to the long-term lease.
Actually, I had a question, Brian.
Yep, Sumya.
Are there any other affordable housing developments that have shorter leases, that less than 99 years?
Yeah, Lynn, as I catch you mid, if you wouldn't mind talking about the experience that you've had in the past 25 years about long-term leases and ones related to shorter than 99 years.
Yeah, I'm not personally familiar with a long-term lease with the municipality for an affordable housing project that's less than 99 years. They may exist out there, but I haven't seen them.
The floor is open.
Brian, on that note, and Marty and Lynn, I don't want to conflate things, but to Soumya's question, I have seen affordable housing restrictions that from the lender are shorter than 99 years, but typically I've actually seen that be an issue for towns where they have wanted them to stay perpetual. And I've represented, for instance, one town that ended up paying over, I can't remember, $1 million plus, because of a deal that was made in the 70s, wasn't as clear about perpetual nature of it, and so they ended up basically buying back the affordability. I think that
and I think that's why it's really important now that when zoning permits are issued, they are now issued within perpetuity rather than for 30 or 40 years, which is the length of the financing.
Yep. Thanks, Pat. You had a hand up, Pat?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just curious, Lynn, how does that, it seems like this project gets resold in a sense internally every 15 years where the guys can do a cash out event as the market changes. Why wouldn't the town take advantage of that? I mean, has anyone valued this financially on a 50-year lease versus 99? Does it change the developer's perspective on anything? Because it would seem to me, and this is not my area, I'm in real estate, but the town would always be better off to have control of it sooner than later if it's feasible.
The affordability is not going to go away, and that cash out, it happens maybe every 15 or 20 years with regard to the affordability. But the town, I believe that what's negotiated in the LDA, and Marty can probably speak a little bit more to that, is a percentage of that cash out. So I don't think that percentage is going to change over the years, so that if the value is higher, then the town's getting whatever the increase is in the percentage. So it seems to me that there's an inflationary factor already built into using a percentage.
But play it, I mean, I'm going to sound like Stephanie now, but if after 2 or 3 bites at the apple, so 15, 30, 45 years, the town could take it back. Maybe they make the whole thing affordable at that point. You own it free and clear, and now you have full control of it. I'm not talking about reducing that component. The town has the ability to do what they want, and maybe it's just converting the whole thing because you're less worried about the revenue. What is the value of this with a 45-year lease versus a 99? Has anyone looked at that?
It's going to go down if the lease is shorter, typically, I mean, that makes sense, right? The I've seen some affordable deals that are less than 99, you know, things like in the 75-year range, but they usually have some kinds of extension provisions or something in them. In most situations that I've seen. But I don't think the value, you know, the value is going to get lower as it goes.
Correct. Yeah, the value will go down if the term goes down, because they're taking on all of the risk of building the real estate and maintaining the real estate. And I don't know of any municipality out there that wants to own and manage a LIHTC project out there. I mean, you know, think about how hard this process is just right now reviewing it. Can you imagine being involved in the day-to-day decisions and their recapitalizations and whatnot?
But aside from that, can we get the number? Can you do some math and see what the number would be?
I'm not comfortable projecting, you know, I'm barely comfortable projecting 15 or 20 years ahead right now, especially having just gone through COVID and the state freezing rents since 2019 on all the affordable units that are out there. It just wouldn't be, you know, based in reality. And that's just not, you know, the way that these kinds of things work.
I'd like to interject, if you don't mind.
Please.
So maybe the leasing isn't the way to go, but I know that could be a recommendation we could make to the select board later on. I'd like to get back to town council's comment, because I find it a little unsettling that, you know, this letter from all these discussions with Stan Martin have been going on for months, and we got set up as a task force after they started, but we're just finding out about it now. I want to know, as town council, you're 100% confident that if legal action was taken against the town, that we would win that case? And does this task force have any exposure to the liability in the event it does take place? And I'd like to know that answer. Thank you.
You don't have any exposure to the liability. The select board chair and town manager were told immediately when Stan reached out to me, which is pretty much standard because that's who I report to, Paul. That's fine. Am I 100% confident? I'm a lawyer. I don't get to be 100% confident of anything. So I say that half jokingly, but look, I wrote Mr. Martin back immediately yesterday, just as I did every time he's reached out, to say I would take the points he's made in good faith, which I encourage everybody to always do, with an open mind, and read the cases he cited. So far, I've read the case he cited. It has to do with buying equipment for the lottery. I'm not sure it's relevant. I know that we won on a preliminary injunction on essentially the same issue in Martha's Vineyard and recently on summary judgment. But that means it's an arguable issue in some ways. And I do think the second issue that I mentioned, which isn't quite what he's getting at, is the one that's harder. That is the one that's a multi-factor test. But I'm confident with the advice we've given. I will look at it again. I don't think you or anybody else on this task force, or frankly any individual member of any board, has liability for a procurement issue.
Okay. But so the town manager and the chair knew about it, but didn't share it with us before.
Paul, I think that's no. I'm not going to stop you right there.
Yeah,
that's not your role to get into. Excuse me, Brian, for a second. How the flow of information goes between my clients and me is not really a matter for public discussion right now, and I don't think that's appropriate. The chair and the town manager had us. I looked into it and I responded to the attorney who called once and then let it lie for a month. It is not an active issue. And then the first time he raised it without knowledge of a manual from the state that was explicitly against what he told me the law was. So that's what I responded to him was. I did not view, and I still don't view this as something that is something that's withheld from anybody.
Okay, to say that this is not on the agenda would be the understatement of the evening.
Okay, but I understand the timeline. I just had one question that
related to the ground lease.
To the RFP, if I understood the attorney correctly, that one way to ensure that there is no trouble in the future is, and I think you alluded to maybe making the recommendation of just starting with the new RFP.
Re-release it. I believe it was re-releasing the RFP.
Answer that, and Paul, don't misunderstand me. That is always an option. under the current RFP, you cannot, there is case law, actually, just to be completely clear, that if you issue an RFP that looks identical to one you've issued before, just to get a different deal, that's not okay either. That raises liability for the town from Civica. So there are two sides to that. It's what I was referring to is if you're going to shorten a material the lease term, which is a material term of the lease, you probably would need an RFP. But respectfully, I don't think this is really.
It really isn't. It really isn't. Okay, Enzo, you guys had your hand up, and then we're gonna go to talk about the report structure. So Enzo, you had a question.
With respect to the length of the lease, Lynn, in the financials, you showed that the debt service on the deal was $720,000 or something like that, right? So does that, what is that, what is the base of that number? Is that covering just interest? Does that count as interest and principal? And if it's interest and principal, how long before the full, like, is that based on a 15-year lease? I mean, 15-year loan or a 30-year loan? And we're like, so after 15 years, does that mean that the entire property is paid off? Is that, I guess I'm just trying to understand the financials.
So the permanent loan on the project is $15 million. On the pro forma that I'm looking at right now. And obviously there's a lot, it's a 30 million or so, dollar project. So that is, I think we talked about the fact that there's a lot of other sources that come in to get the project to work. As far as how much is paid off in the first 15 years, helps if I enable it, right? Yeah. It doesn't look like I can, doesn't look like I have access to play around with it, but let's just do a back of the envelope, that in 15 years, you're probably only going to have paid off about half of that, about 7 million.
So you're assuming it's a 30-year loan. It's a 30-year loan, probably.
Yeah.
Let me
just say, I don't know. Yeah, let me, I keep having this login thing now pop up. I'm just having technology issues today. I'm sorry about that. If I can check out of it, I can actually see. So obviously, that presumably once you're getting to the permanent loan, it's principal and interest. During the construction period, it may just be, interest only. Just can't seem to get my technology to work today to get to my sources and uses.
Are there any follow-up questions related to this, either the terms of the long-term terms of the lease, the 99-year lease, general questions, specific questions? Now's the time. Pat.
I'm here. Finally.
Since we're not going to get it, Lynn, if you could, I mean,
yeah,
I think
I got something open. Hang on.
Essential for us to make, for me to feel like we have some concept of what the numbers really are. So if you can collect that rather than putting you on the spot right here and get that stuff back to us, any of those financial areas. And I would like to know if Civico would just contribute the money to the town. I mean, maybe there's no option.
Contribute what money to the town?
The 2.8 million or 2.2 million, whatever the number is, in exchange for the garage.
But there's nowhere to put the garage. So why would you?
We could ask them whether they could do that. I don't think they would because they. Yeah.
What if the Winchester Savings Bank, if you offered them 2.2 million to build a garage, does someone ask them that question if they'd build a garage on their land?
But it was my understanding that the cost to build a garage was something like $5 million.
Yeah, I'd defer to Bill on that more than me because that's not my arena.
Well, the question was clearly what are those numbers, and the question for the select board is, or a value statement in the report is maybe that not building the parking is an option and quote taking the money. So that is, I guess that's part of the negotiating. Or it's something to look into for the negotiating team. Lisa, we have about 15 minutes left. I guess I will put up the report structure.
Great. So while you're doing that, the report structure is actually the culmination of the series of things that you need to do as part of your charge. And I want to make sure that we don't stray from that. So to be very clear, the charge is specifically that you are to meet as a task force to receive these briefings when you've received them, except for the last area, which will have to fit into Friday's meeting, as well as you have the PowerPoints, you have some of the what we'd be presenting to you there. You also have the materials online. You can take a look at that. The second is to work with an independent financial consultant. So that's Lynn, and you're doing that proactively now. And then it's to receive public comment. So you did that via a meeting and also received a packet of information from a number of people. So you have that in your charge. And then the final is to write a report. Specifically, that report is focused on the rankings. Certainly the charge is that you could just, vote and rank the projects and provide that. But certainly we would recommend a report that has more than just the rankings. And actually we would recommend that the rankings come from your findings and recommendations, that you actually do that first before you do the rankings. Given that you've received enough information up to now to put certain findings and certain recommendations in there, you can also put any concerns, questions you still have. There are realistically at the end of this going to be trade-offs that you might not entirely understand or know what direction it's going to go in, because that is a policy decision that the negotiating team will have to make. But it is important that those concerns, even if they're contradictory among task force members, be put in here. So this is not necessarily a consensus document where you can only report something out unless everybody has the same number 1, number 2, or number 3, and or put findings here if the findings have to make sense to every single one here, or you can have findings where you might have a difference in opinion, and those should be put down there. If this project was simple and everyone came to the same conclusion, then we wouldn't have these robust discussions. So the first part that I know the public can't see is essentially just the introduction, the background, the charge, the membership, and then this is sort of the meat of it here, which is an executive summary, which I just put in the timeline here. Obviously, you guys would put in the executive summary that includes any conclusions or any thoughts that you would have. And then something a little bit more straightforward, which is these rankings and recommendations. So everything here is listed in the order that we just happen to advertise a charge for. So it's the same as above, it's same in what all the listings are. It's not necessarily meant to say that one is more important than the other. And you can certainly rearrange these as you actually develop a ranking if you want to actually have them ranked 1 through 6. So any questions right now on this report in terms of what you need for the findings or recommendations before we then get into the homework, the next meeting structures, and other inputs you might have?
Stephanie, go ahead.
Thanks,
And then
Brian.
Paul, and then Paul after.
Lisa, one question about the homework of reviewing the public comments. Is our charge to factor in the public comments as a factor of our ranking, or are we ranking based on our 5 relative groups we're representing in constituencies, and the public comments are background info for us and things that the select board will be weighing alongside our report?
Yep. So each of you will be providing your input into the rankings based on all the available information, including the public comment, including the information and expertise you come to the table with, and especially including the briefings that you heard from the experts, the materials that we've given you to read, and certainly any questions and comments and discussion that have come up along the way.
Yeah, Paul, go ahead.
I might be incorrect, but didn't we already take a poll amongst the task force and rank the top 3 areas? And did we get those results? I remember Mr. Connington recommended that, and I think you sent that out, and I know I filled it out. And I thought we got the results back where it was revenue and parking, but I could be incorrect.
No, so the prompt for the survey was to what should we talk about first, mainly because those two were seen. I don't know necessarily that it was the priority. It could have been that it was the most complicated, but we said, what do you want to talk about first? But now each of you will still have to kind of weight these priority areas. This was one question that I actually had for the group in terms of this report structure, is that just ranking them 1 through 6 doesn't offer a lot of separation. And I wanted it to see what the group thought about putting your highest area like worth 3x, your second highest 2, and then the rest 1, just to actually offer more separation, if some way to really say what your preference is. So we have a few minutes here. I wanted to see what people thought about that.
I just want to finish my comment, please.
Yeah.
In reference to the public comment, I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but I sure am. I know a lot of those letters that came in were solicited by a certain group into town. I got a copy of the request that was kind of divisive because it kind of rehashing the whole argument over the vote that happened in June. And it actually gave a form letter to say, fill it out, your action has to be heard, your voice needs to be heard now. So I would take that with a grain of salt, and I wouldn't say those few letters overrule or overweigh the vote of the people that happened in June. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Someone else, did anyone else have a hand up? Or so in terms of the rankings, kind of a weighting of it, giving it more points rather than everyone.
Brian, could I suggest that you sort of drop that concept today as we put that on the agenda to discuss on Friday, to give people some thoughts or some time to think about that. What I need quickly in the next 5 minutes is that obviously we still have one more area to work through, but the task force right now, I think, should consider getting a head start and individually filling out the findings areas. So based on your briefings and your understanding of this project, is to start gathering the important information, concerns, questions, opportunities that you want in this area. Ideally, the most, the quickest thing to do would be to say, if you could have these done by Thursday, we could actually compile this for Friday's meeting. But let me know if you feel that's rushed, if you want to maybe finish the meeting on Friday, have the weekend and get those findings to us maybe Monday or Tuesday so that we could have those during the Wednesday working meeting. So any thoughts about that individual homework and getting us the findings by Friday, or would you rather wait till next Monday? Next Wednesday before that meeting?
I personally think next Wednesday would be better.
Wednesday. For Wednesday, Stephanie.
I had a thought, which was I would be comfortable providing my first draft of bullets so that we had something to look at on Friday, knowing that we were all going to want some more time to think and add to and remove and finalize. And my question to who's actually writing the report? Like, who is Brian the one responsible for compiling, and does he have the pen, so to speak?
Right. So I think what we anticipated is at the 4th meeting, I would have all of your, each of you are filling out these findings and recommendations. I'm going to have everybody's comments in there once. Stephanie, you'll be red. Bill, you'll be blue. Pat, you'll be green. We'll find out where there's consensus. We'll delete, we'll and wherever there's issues or contradicting things, we'll obviously put both of those in. But it's going to be kind of that's how it's going to get written. It's going to get written by you and edited by you in real time at the next meeting.
So should we be at the point, Brian, that we presume we're not going to get any more data? We're not going to get any financial what we have is what we have, and that's it.
No, I think we have some homework we need to do on the town side to put together that agenda for your first working meeting on Friday. Obviously trying to get that last presentation to you. And as you've seen from the beginning of every meeting, we kind of start off with trying to answer the questions that you posed in the previous meeting. There's no reason why I would change that format for the next coming meetings.
And Pat, that's why I was suggesting, like, there are some things I could write as my findings for Friday. There's more information, like it's not going to be done on Friday, but I think we all could at least start.
That makes sense.
I'm okay with starting, just hard to commit. I mean, some of these things, at least from my perspective, are priorities, and I don't know if I'm gonna be ready to go public with it until we have the answers. If a 50-year lease got the town the same money as a 99-year lease, why wouldn't we do a 50-year lease? To me, those are sort of basic, just and get the town back in control of the property. You can resell it or do whatever you want. So there's some of those things are pretty substantive. It sounds like I'm not going to get any help with the garage, so I'm just going to have to deal with that on my own, because it sounds like the town's opinion is there's no opportunity there. So that'll be my answer. I can share with everyone right now that, the town doesn't feel there's any solution, so we just have to live with it. But I'll work towards that. I'm okay with it. I just don't want to commit to that, where it'll be at.
So Pat, I just want to jump in and say I don't think it was ever determined whether that study that was done, whether there was opportunity for a public-private parking garage. That was not studied as one of the alternatives. I think my only point was the sites that were looked at that were town-owned at the time were challenging in both construction-wise and financially.
Well, this site's challenging. Everyone's said that, and this is going through and on a timeline that's relatively accelerated. So I don't know why parking is such a low priority. With the development you're talking and everything else, you have very different downtown from a parking standpoint. So if there's no effort to look at that, I think you just have to be prepared. There's a lot of risk in that. And it's something that I don't have the power to change.
Can I ask one more clarifying question kind of along these lines? Our findings should be, like to Pat's point, I think a finding is maximizing parking to at least at the number of current spots is critical to the Chamber of Commerce and the business community. Like that, I feel like that's a finding we have made in these meetings. Is that accurate, Lisa and Brian? That's the kind of thing we should be finding?
Yeah, I would say bullet points versus sentences. There's certainly more information that you guys could put in an appendix. So for example, I'm just going to use something simple. So if you wanted to say you're taking into consideration the public comment, which you are waiving that in, but you want to have the public comments all be an appendix, if you want to have some of Lynn's documents be part of the appendix so that you can people can refer to that in an official document, absolutely. To your point, I would say leave the rankings to the very last thing, right? You want to be able to understand and discuss your findings. You want everybody to hear every perspective. You want to make sure that it's embodied in the report. And then based on that, and that alone, not that alone, sorry, based on then that would be the best time to then have you guys do the rankings.
And at what point do we ask the selectmen if we can have more time? Is that appropriate now, or do we just keep the gun on and then if we get to Friday or next week, we deal with it?
Yeah, you could ask at any time.
So quickly, I will say that there is a select board meeting on the 27th. I don't think, because I know that some of you have to go, the clock is ringing behind me, is I need to have a better understanding of how much more time you need. So what I can do is I kind of put a placeholder for Monday's meeting, and we can put that as an agenda item for Friday. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
So the town through the town manager's office will be in touch about the coming meetings. We will meet again as a task force on the 30th, where we will be writing the report.
With two, and then they will be public meetings, the working meetings this Friday and next Wednesday. That's hopefully to wrap up everything that we need so that we can have a productive writing session on the 30th.
Great. Well, without further ado, we're only a couple minutes over. Thank you to everyone, all the task members that are making through these long